Hi, fourth graders. All right, today is Wednesday, the 14th, and we started off today continuing to talk about measurement, and we finished or we didn't finish. We finished a section of where we left off yesterday with talking about these different reference materials. So this is the reference materials that we get for fourth grade, and it just has it's kind of like a cheat sheet for what the units are. And so I wanted to make sure everybody had that that's at home. So we put this into our notebook. So we started this yesterday with length and weight and mass. And so today we continued with volume and capacity. So you have gallons, quarts, pints, cups, fluid ounces for your customary units. And then you have your metric units with 1 liter equaling 1,000 milliliters. So pause the video and make sure you get this into your math notebook because we will need those conversions as we get ready to go into the sections where we are having to do those conversions. After that, we went to the next page and we made this little gallon man. And Gallon Man, he helps us with those. So you can look at this, and so it really helps to see the sizes. So here, this gallon is the majority of my little guy here. So he's the biggest unit. 4 quarts is equal to 1 gallon. You've got 2 pints is equal to 1 quart, or 2, 4, 6, 8 pints is equal to 1 gallon. So you can use this to help you use those conversion or to do those conversions. So go ahead, add him to your notebook because that could be a helpful tool there. And then we went to page 521, and this is where we left off yesterday. So let me get this, focus a little better here. Turn on some light so we can see. There, that looks a little better. All right, so here on page 521, we continued talking about these benchmark units. So if you flip back to page 520 here, it has some of those there with the units of length, volume, weight, and it continues with length, volume, and mass on the back side for the metric units. And so they've got them listed here. So we made ourselves a little key. So everything that's listed with the L, that has to do with measuring length. Everything with the W is measuring weight or mass. And then everything with the V is measuring volume or capacity. So we went through here and we were talking about the different things. So like a football field, we said we were going to measure that in yards. Length, we could use inches. And so when we were talking about these, we were talking about, one of them was a cell phone, or somewhere in here it was a cell phone. So if I take my cell phone and I try to use, let's say, a foot, well, I know that a ruler is the same as 1 foot, so 12 inches is the same. And if I try to do that, the ruler, see how the phone is shorter than the ruler? So my phone is smaller than 1 foot. So I need a unit that's going to be close. So I could either use inches, and I could say, okay, so here's my inches. I could say, okay, this is about 6.5 inches. And because 1 inch is only about this big, so using a smaller unit that's appropriate makes my job a little bit easier. And so I could use centimeters. So this is about close to 17 centimeters. And so we want to make sure that we're using the appropriate unit. So looking at these benchmarks, going back, and when you see it talking about yards and inches and meters and things like that, have something that you're referring back to as a, kind of a a benchmark to think about. Okay, like with Graham, the dollar bill, or I think of a paper clip is the same. So if I'm holding a paper clip, I know, okay, that barely weighs anything. Okay, the mass of that is really, really small. It's almost like you're holding nothing, right? Compared to a bat. And so whenever I see something that is measured in grams, I always think about, okay, this is a very small unit of measurement, and just having that to refer back to is helpful. So we went through here, and this is all about just finding appropriate, what unit. Are you going to be using 10 cups, or are you going to be using 10 gallons? So we went through each of these, and we did this page. And then let's see here. We did 523 for our independent work yesterday. So today is 524. So this is numbers 11 through 16. This is what you're working on. And it's the same type of questions where you're looking at, what the situation is, like what's the height of the jungle gym. And so when you're going through here, some of these are, if you're measuring height, you're wanting to go to this category in your notebook that talks about, we're not doing volume. This is talking about the length of things. So certain units have to do with length. So looking through these, so some of these like grams is measuring, that's over here in the weight and mass category. So we're not wanting to know, the mass or the weight of that. We're wanting to know the length of it. So making sure we have the right unit is what we're practicing there. All of this is going to be recorded. Let me see, I accidentally got out of Seesaw. Let me log back in real quick. All of this is going to be recorded in your Seesaw assignment. You have right here week 31 math. If you click on this and open up your assignment, you have, this was yesterday, so if you go down here to page 3, Wednesday, page 524, you're going to upload your work and enter your answers A, B, C, or D here. Then you can draft that. When you were done with that, ST Math, and then in small group today we continued working on taking a mixed number and putting it into an improper fraction, and an improper fraction back to a mixed number, and did some review with that. In reading today, where am I? Yellow. All right, reading today, we read the next chapter of Fudgemania. So if you go to Google Classroom and you go down to Book Club, we read chapter 8. So that recording is right here. So you can click that and follow along with that. And then after you listen to the story, go ahead and go to Seesaw, your activities, and go to right here, week 31. Nope, not that one. Sorry. Book Study Fudgemania. Open up this. And we did together the character chart. So we talked about who Peter is, we talked about who Fudge is, and who Sheila is. And so we took some notes about just kind of, the description of the character, some notes about them, some things that have happened in the story. So we said Peter's the firstborn child of the Hatcher family. He argues and gets frustrated a lot with his younger brother Fudge, and his worst enemy is this girl named Sheila. Fudge, or Farley Drexel Hatcher, is the middle child of the Hatcher family. He's wanting to marry Sheila, and he's very, very curious. He has so many questions, and he's kind of that, the one that's always there kind of causing mischief and just kind of getting into trouble. Sheila is that enemy that we were talking about. So her and Peter go back and forth a lot. They say a lot of things that are not very nice to each other. And she has actually, since they're on vacation together, she has offered to Peter's mom to watch Fudge because, he needs someone looking after him because he is, like I said, always getting into something. So she's offered to babysit him in exchange for some, getting paid. And so we said that they're on vacation with the Hatcher family. They're staying right next door. And so we took some notes on her. And then here we did this one by ourselves. So we had the topic, so we're making predictions. So the first topic was vacation in Maine with Sheila. So what do you think is going to happen? So these guys, um, Peter and the Hatcher family, they're on vacation. The the other family is just right next door. There's literally a wall and a door separating the two of them. So what predictions do you can you make? What do you think is, how do you think this is going to play out? Do you think something, good is going to come out of all of this, or it's just going to, keep being, them arguing back and forth? And then the next one is Sheila has now started babysitting Fudge. So we're kind of in the beginning stages of that. How do you think that's going to go? Because there was a mention in the book about how in the past, there was something that happened where he ended up busting his two front teeth, and she's like, oh no, but I took a class, and so she's convinced mom that that she can babysit Fudge and she's much more responsible and stuff like that now. What do you think's going to happen? So type your prediction here, and then in the boxes that follow, why do you think this? So why do you think, whatever you predicted is going to happen? So explain yourself here. And then later on, once we finish the story, at the end, we'll come revisit this and see if our predictions were correct. So once you do those two, go ahead and draft that. Then we were working on the point of view small group activity with that. So we did that. And then in writing, we went to Google Classroom and this daily writing review. We are on page 5. And so, page 5. So page 5, we read this story about school buses. And so it says, in the United States, we see school buses almost every day. They are big, yellow, and have black writing on them. Have you ever wondered what happens to them after they get old and cannot be used by the school systems anymore? Some of them get broken down and sold for parts, or put in a junkyard to rot forever. Some others are bought and taken on an incredible journey to Central and South America. Countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica use old school buses as their public transportation. They are called, and I'm going to butcher this, but camionitas, maybe? Or tourists call them chicken buses. The drivers own the buses and drive them as their full-time job. When they buy the buses, they fix them up, they put speakers to play music, and they paint the outside in wild colors and designs. Then they give the bus a name and drive the route they plan for their passengers. All right, so we went through these. So the first one was talking about just different capitalization, and then this last one was a spelling change. Number 2, what change should be made? So either changing punctuation, comma, or capitalization. And then transition words. So here you're at the end. What kind of transitions do we need to go at the end of a sentence? And then talking about why are these 3 words, Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica, why do we capitalize those? And then we rewrote this one correctly. And then the writing prompt today was just to tell me something about your family. Maybe you went on a fun trip that you want to tell me about, or maybe you are relating a lot to our character Fudge in the story, and you've kind of got that sibling that's always kind of getting into mischief, kind of like Fudge is, and just whatever you want to tell me, you can write and tell me something there about your family. Then you can X out of that. Going back to the agenda. All right, so science today, we had our soil lab, and we got out our science notebooks and jotted down some things today that I want you to make sure you have. All right, so yesterday we made, this is yesterday, so you should have this already. Yesterday we made some predictions about what is going to retain, what are the levels going to be of how much water is retained. So yesterday we learned that retain, or maybe, yeah, yesterday, or maybe it was Monday. Anyways, we learned that retain means to hold on to something. So if you're retaining information, you're holding on to that information. In this case, we're talking about retaining water. So we're holding on to the water. So here's my little container of water. We pour the water into the soil, and the soil is going to hold on because of those particle sizes. It's going to hold on to some of the soil, or some of the water, and the rest of the water that it's not going to hold on to, some of it will go through those particles and will be drain out to the bottom of the container. So we made a prediction yesterday. Then today we went ahead and did it, and we were talking about why this is important. Like, why do we study this? And the reason is because when you are planting, you need to know about soil and water retention because it has to do a lot with how your plants are going to grow. So if we have this plant here. This is my lovely drawing of a tomato. It's supposed to be a tomato plant, so use your imagination. And I pour water onto this plant. Some of the water is going to, well, not some of the water is going to go into the soil down where the roots are. And we know that plants need this because this is how they get their water. They get it through their roots. Well, some of the water will stay with the soil. That's the water that the soil retains. And some of it usually pots, if it's like in a potted, like you have a potted plant or something like that, they'll have these holes on the bottom, and some of them drain through at the some of the water will drain through at the bottom and come out. So this water down here is not staying with the soil. So we can have different extremes, and the extremes are not so good. We can have an extreme where we are retaining a lot of water, meaning a lot of water is staying in the container with those roots. And we talked about why this is a bad thing. We said that, think about just all of this water. It can, if it doesn't have the ability to drain and it's just sitting there, like I've had plants that didn't have good drainage holes, and the water just collects in there and it keeps collecting and it's just sitting, and it can kind of, rot and get moldy and gross, and it just ruins your plant. Versus the other extreme is we are not retaining barely any water. So the water gets poured in, it's going straight through, and you've got most of the water, or most all of the water, draining out. That's bad because now our roots are going to dry out. We don't have any water getting. Our plant is not getting any water because all the water has quickly drained out. The plant didn't have time to get the water that it needs. The ideal for our plant that we're going to plant is that in between. We don't want all the water hanging out. We do want some of the water to drain, but we also want some of the water to retain and be held onto by that soil, so that it can use it for the plant. So this is why it's important, of why we're learning this. And so we did our lab where we did this. We poured the water into, where is my picture? So we did this where we poured the water onto the soil, and we saw some of it hanging out with the soil. We saw some of it draining through to the bottom. And then the way that we can figure out how much has actually been retained by the soil, because we can't see, we could see the clay. The clay was kind of the water was sitting on the top, like we could see it kind of puddle up because the clay particles are so small. It was hard for that water to push through. But some of them we couldn't see, or just look at it and say, oh yeah, that's how much water that the soil held on to. So what we can do is we can do the math. So if we know the total amount that we poured in, so let's say we poured in 100 milliliters of water, and we can look at the part that comes out, the part that's drained. So let's say that's 40. If this is just a simple part whole, if we have 100 that went in and 40 that came out, we can subtract and get the amount that was retained and held on to by the soil. So there's several statements that we can make by doing this. So we could say the greater amount that was retained, meaning the more water that was that the soil was holding on to, the smaller the particle size. Because if you remember, go back to our notes about particle sizes and think back to that thing we did where I had the kids line up and I was pretending like I was the water trying to go through. When you've got these really, really tight and small particles all close together, like in clay, it's very, very difficult for that water to go through because there's not a lot of gaps and cracks and things like that where the water can move through. It kind of like what we saw it just puddled on top, and it was difficult for it to make its way down to the bottom of the container. We could also make another statement. Let's go back to this. So if the greater amount, so we could say the same thing. The smaller the amount retained, the larger the particle sizes. So with things like gravel and sand, we've got these larger particles. Look at these gaps. That water can go right through. There's not much holding on to it. Okay, so it's easier to kind of make its way through to the bottom of the container because we've got these large gaps and things like that. The water can easily go through. So there's lots of statements we can make thinking about those particles. So those particle sizes are very important. The texture, the ability to retain water, the ability to support life, all of it ties back to these particle sizes. So we'll keep referencing and going back to those. And so all of these notes, make sure you pause and get this one. Make sure you pause and get this one. These are, let me find my place back here. All right, going to Seesaw, going to activities, going to week 31 science, clicking your draft that you've got. All right, so we are on page, we are on page 6. So in page 6, go ahead and upload that information. So the part about, why this is important to learn about, and then how we find that ability, or not ability, that amount that is retained. Go ahead and upload those, make them nice and big so I can see that you are following along with that. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about the ability to support plant life. So what happens when we take these soils and we put seeds in them and try to grow some plants? What, if we continue to, which of course we're going to water them, if we continue to water them, what does it mean for the plant when we have some where the water is just sticking in with the soil and not draining versus others that drain right through, or that happy medium? What does that look like for our plant? So we were going to do tomato plants, but I think that would take too long. So I think we decided everybody was in agreement. I believe we'll have to talk about it again tomorrow, but I think we're going to switch to rye because we should get some results in just 2 to 3 days. So we'll look at that and we'll add some more. So go ahead and draft since there's more to come there. And then going down to the agenda here, we talked about Sally Ride, and you can click on this to watch a video about her. And then go ahead and do your article for today and your questions. And we were just talking after a little bit about, why she's a role model and why people look up to her, and why, these people that are doing things that are the first, like she was the first woman to go off into space. Why is that important for people to see? And so we were kind of talking about, when people see that, it lets them know that, okay, I can do that too. Something that only white men were doing, this whole, history of man, mostly, all Caucasian. She didn't see any other women going off to space. The women played very, very different roles in society at the time she was, wanting to do this. And so, it was important for her, even though it was challenging and it was hard, and she probably faced a lot of criticism and things like that. Like that wasn't, people probably told her that wasn't something women should be doing. she continued her education, she continued and she made it happen. And, now think about all the women that have followed after her and the young girls that looked up to her and said, okay, if she can do it, I can do it too. So, um, really good story there. So make sure you watch and follow along with that. And then your questions, of course, are right here in Google Classroom, Week 31 Social Studies. Make sure you click on that, and the Wednesday page is just a couple questions. And so, where's the agenda? So go ahead and do that. And then we did some practice with fractions and decimals at the end of the day for intervention. And let's look at tomorrow. So tomorrow, make sure you wear your purple, and we will support our military kids and families and wrap up the rest of the week. All right, thanks for watching.